Some moments in life make you realize just how quickly people can judge based on appearances. One such moment began in a high-end jewelry store, where a simple woman walked in, hoping to purchase a gift. What she didn't expect was to be completely ignored, simply because of how she looked. Isabella had always been a woman of modest means. While she had a deep appreciation for the finer things in life, she wasn't one to flaunt her wealth. She wore simple, comfortable clothes, and her jewelry collection was modest at best. Nothing too extravagant, nothing that would draw attention in a room full of the rich and powerful. Still, she loved a good challenge and enjoyed the thrill of finding something meaningful and beautiful, even in the smallest places. That afternoon, Isabella had set her sights on a gift for her sister's upcoming birthday. Her sister, who had always adored fine jewelry, would never expect such a luxurious present, and Isabella was determined to surprise her. She had done her research on the jewelry store she was visiting, a prestigious place known for its exclusive collections. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She was simply looking for the perfect piece to express her love. As she walked through the store's glass doors, the staff barely spared her a glance. The store gleamed with opulence. The sparkling diamonds, the gold and platinum collections, and the exquisite watches. To the staff, this was the world they inhabited, and in their eyes, Isabella didn't seem to belong. A saleswoman, dressed in a sleek black dress and with a demeanor of cold professionalism, looked Isabella up and down. Her gaze lingered just long enough to be noticed, then shifted away without offering the slightest acknowledgement. Isabella's presence was completely ignored, and the quiet hum of the store seemed to reinforce her invisibility. Isabella stood for a moment, unsure whether to leave or continue looking. She wasn't accustomed to such treatment, but there was something about the store's exclusivity that made her feel small, out of place. She could have turned around and walked out, but she refused to let anyone's judgments define her. Just as she gathered her thoughts and started to move toward a display case, the saleswoman's tone suddenly shifted. "Can I help you, ma'am?" she asked, but there was no warmth in her voice, only a cold, dismissive formality. The words stung, and Isabella could feel the weight of the assumption that she wasn't a serious customer, that she didn't belong in this world of luxury. But what Isabella didn't know was that she wasn't just a woman looking for a gift. She was about to prove to everyone in the store that they had misjudged her. What happened next would make them regret every moment of their assumptions. Isabella took a deep breath, trying to shake off the sting of the saleswoman's dismissive tone. She had worked hard for everything she had, and she was used to people underestimating her. But today, she wasn't going to let anyone's assumptions get in the way. She had a mission: to find the perfect gift for her sister. She calmly approached a display case, her eyes scanning the collection of stunning rings and necklaces. Each piece was more extravagant than the last, a showcase of luxury and craftsmanship. But it wasn't the price tag that caught Isabella's attention. It was the thought that had been put into each piece. She knew her sister would appreciate something timeless, something that would remind her of how much Isabella cared. The saleswoman, still keeping her distance, finally approached her again. This time, her voice was clipped, almost mechanical. "Are you looking for anything in particular?" she asked, clearly impatient. Isabella felt her heart sink, but she refused to let the woman's attitude throw her off course. "Yes," Isabella replied calmly, her tone measured. "I'm looking for a necklace, something elegant but not too flashy. My sister doesn't like attention-grabbing pieces. She's more understated, like me." She smiled softly, hoping to show that she wasn't just another customer looking to spend money for the sake of it. The saleswoman raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by the description. She glanced at Isabella's outfit, casual, comfortable, and clearly not in line with the opulence of the store, and then at the modest watch on her wrist. "Perhaps you'd prefer something from our more affordable collection," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Isabella felt the words sting, but she refused to let them show. She had faced similar judgments before, and this wasn't going to be any different. She looked directly at the saleswoman, holding her gaze for a moment. "No, thank you," Isabella said, her voice firm. "I want to see your best pieces." The saleswoman hesitated for a moment, clearly thrown off by Isabella's response, but she eventually led her to a display showcasing the store's most exclusive necklaces, pieces that were worth more than most people's annual salary. Isabella's eyes flicked over the collection, her mind already made up. She wasn't here to settle for less. After a few moments, Isabella pointed to a delicate diamond necklace, understated yet breathtaking in its simplicity. "This one," she said, her voice steady. "It's perfect." The saleswoman's eyes widened for a split second before she quickly masked her surprise. "Are you sure?" she asked, clearly skeptical. "It's one of our most expensive pieces." Isabella nodded, a quiet smile playing on her lips. "Yes, I'm sure." Just then, a man entered the store. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and carried himself with the kind of quiet confidence that immediately commanded attention. Isabella didn't recognize him at first, but the saleswoman's expression shifted the moment she laid eyes on him. She quickly turned to him with a forced smile, but the man's gaze never left Isabella. There was a subtle tension in the air, and Isabella couldn't help but wonder why the woman's demeanor had changed so abruptly. The man approached them, his voice calm and even. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his eyes briefly flicking to the saleswoman, then back to Isabella. The saleswoman, now visibly flustered, stumbled over her words. "No, sir, there's no problem. I was just showing this lady a selection of necklaces." She forced a smile, clearly trying to recover from the earlier exchange. Isabella turned to the man, her heart racing a little as she realized who he was, the owner of the jewelry store. She had heard of him before, but she never imagined their paths would cross under these circumstances. "I've made my decision," Isabella said, her voice steady despite the sudden rush of adrenaline. "I'll take this one." The owner's gaze softened, and he gave a small nod. "Of course," he said, his tone changing completely. "I'll have it wrapped up for you." The saleswoman, still recovering from the surprise of the situation, quickly went to the back of the store. Isabella stood there, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. She hadn't expected this turn of events, but she knew that she had just proven something important. She didn't need to prove her worth to anyone. Not the saleswoman, not the other customers, and certainly not the man who had been so quick to judge her. As she waited for the necklace to be wrapped, she couldn't help but smile to herself. What had started as an uncomfortable experience was about to turn into a lesson, one that the jewelry store staff would not soon forget. As the saleswoman returned with the necklace wrapped and ready, her movements were noticeably hurried, as if she wanted to get this transaction over with. She placed the delicate box in front of Isabella, trying her best to regain her composure. The entire atmosphere in the store had shifted, and it wasn't just because of the necklace. It was because of the quiet power Isabella now held. The owner of the store, who had been standing off to the side, approached Isabella with a small but genuine smile. "I'm terribly sorry about the confusion earlier," he said, his tone much warmer now. "Please allow me to personally assist you." Isabella couldn't help but notice the difference in the way he was treating her now compared to before. His demeanor had softened, and he was no longer treating her like an outsider. But despite the shift, she didn't let the change in tone sway her. She knew that the only reason he was now showing interest was because of the presence of the necklace she had chosen, a piece that symbolized more than just luxury. It symbolized how wrong he had been to dismiss her earlier. "There's no need for special treatment," Isabella replied, her voice calm but resolute. "I simply wanted to buy a gift for my sister, that's all." The owner seemed taken aback, but he quickly regained his composure. "Of course. I just want to make sure your experience here is a pleasant one." Isabella smiled politely, but inside she felt a sense of satisfaction that she hadn't expected. She wasn't here to be made to feel small, or to fit into some preordained mold of who was worthy of shopping in this luxury store. She was here because she had a vision, a desire to give her sister something beautiful and meaningful. And nothing, especially not the assumptions of others, was going to take that from her. As she walked to the counter to pay for the necklace, she could feel the eyes of the other customers on her. It wasn't just the saleswoman who had been judging her. It was everyone in the store who had assumed that because she didn't fit their idea of what a proper customer should look like, she didn't belong. But now their gaze had changed. Now they could see that her worth wasn't defined by her clothes or her appearance. The owner walked with her to the counter, his earlier coldness replaced by a forced politeness. But Isabella wasn't bothered. She could tell he was trying to smooth over his earlier mistake, hoping to undo the impression he had made. But it was too late for that. What had happened in the store wasn't just about him trying to sell a necklace. It was about the judgment he had passed, and the way he had assumed she didn't belong in the world of luxury. As Isabella finished her transaction, she thanked the owner, her voice clear and steady. "I'm sure you'll understand the importance of treating everyone with respect from now on. It doesn't matter who they are or how they look." The owner's face flushed, and he nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. There was no more small talk, no more pretending. Isabella knew the store would never make the same mistake again. As she walked out the door with the carefully wrapped box in hand, she couldn't help but feel a quiet triumph. This wasn't just about buying jewelry. It was about standing up against stereotypes, challenging assumptions, and showing that true worth comes from within. And Isabella had just proven it, not with anger, but with grace. She had shown them all that she was more than they could ever have imagined. As she stepped out into the sunlight, she felt a renewed sense of confidence. This experience had been uncomfortable, yes, but it had reminded her of something powerful. She didn't need to conform to anyone's expectations. She could carve her own path, and no one could take that from her. As Isabella stepped out of the jewelry store, the weight of the experience slowly began to sink in. She could feel the cool air against her skin, and as she walked toward her car, a sense of quiet satisfaction began to build inside her. She had entered that store as someone who had been judged based on her appearance, someone who had been treated as though she did not belong. But she had left as someone who had proven that no one should ever be judged solely by how they look. Isabella knew that what had happened inside the store was not just about a simple jewelry purchase. It was about how she had been dismissed, how the staff had assumed that because of her modest attire, she could not afford their luxury products. It was a stark reminder of how easily people can fall into the trap of assumptions, assuming someone's worth based on their outward appearance rather than their character or true value. But the moment she had chosen that necklace, the moment she stood her ground and refused to be dismissed, she had reminded them all of something important. Her worth was not for anyone to decide. She had made that point clear without ever needing to raise her voice. Her actions spoke louder than anything else. As she drove home, Isabella could not help but replay the moments from the store in her mind. She thought about the saleswoman's initial dismissive attitude, how the woman had sized her up and assumed she did not belong. She thought about the way the owner had treated her differently after seeing her choice of the necklace. But most of all, she thought about how she had stood her ground, how she had not allowed their judgments to define her. That night, as she sat at her kitchen table, Isabella felt a sense of peace. She had done what she set out to do, not just in buying a gift for her sister, but in showing herself and others that true value lies not in appearances, but in who you are as a person. She had faced judgment, but she had turned it into an opportunity to stand tall. And the most powerful part was that she had done it all without anger, without confrontation, just with her own quiet strength. The following day, as she handed her sister the necklace, she could see the joy in her eyes as she unwrapped the beautiful gift. But as Isabella watched her sister smile, she knew that the true gift wasn't just the necklace. It was the lesson she had learned about herself, and how she would never allow anyone's assumptions to control her sense of self-worth again. Isabella had faced the judgment, but she had also proven that no matter how small or simple a person may seem in the eyes of others, they can hold within them something far more valuable. And that, Isabella thought, is what truly matters. Days passed, and life began to return to normal for Isabella. The quiet triumph she felt after the incident at the jewelry store was still fresh in her mind, but she knew that she had learned something even more important: how to stand firm in the face of judgment, and how to refuse to let anyone else's assumptions define her. She had walked into that store thinking she was just another customer, but by the time she left, she had made an impact far greater than she had ever expected. But while she had proved something to the jewelry store staff, Isabella could not help but wonder how many others had gone through similar experiences and had been left feeling invisible or insignificant. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that her own story was just one among many. People everywhere were being judged every day based on their appearance, their clothing, their income, or where they came from. It was a constant cycle of assumptions, and too many people suffered in silence because they felt as though they didn't fit the mold of what was considered acceptable or worthy. One evening, as she sat at her kitchen table sipping a cup of tea, she had an idea. She picked up her phone and began typing. She had always been the quiet type, content to go about her business without drawing attention. But now, after everything she had been through, she realized that her story could be used to help others. She could use her voice, not to boast, but to make a point that no one should ever be judged based on how they look, a point that every person has worth, no matter where they come from or how much money they have. The idea was simple: to share her story and to start a conversation. She didn't want to be a martyr or a victim, she simply wanted to make people think. She wanted to show them how easily someone could be dismissed, how quickly people made judgments, and how those judgments could have a lasting impact on someone's life. And most importantly, she wanted to let people know that it's okay to stand up for yourself, even if you're not in a position of power. She began to write a post for her blog, sharing her experience at the jewelry store, how she had been treated, and how she had chosen to handle it. As she typed, she realized how cathartic it was to relive the experience. Not with bitterness, but with understanding. She had stood up for herself, and now she wanted others to know that they could too. After hitting publish, Isabella sat back, feeling a sense of relief. The post wasn't about making a statement for the sake of drama. It was about opening a dialogue, encouraging others to see beyond the surface. To see the person, not the clothes they wear or the status they hold. What Isabella did not expect, however, was the overwhelming response she received. Within hours, people from all walks of life began commenting on her post. Some shared their own stories of being judged. Others expressed their gratitude for the reminder that their worth is not determined by anyone else's standards. Isabella realized that she had started something much bigger than herself, a movement of sorts that challenged the way people viewed others based on assumptions. The response was humbling, but more than that, it gave Isabella a sense of purpose she had never expected. Her simple act of standing up for herself had created a ripple effect, one that encouraged others to do the same. Isabella's journey didn't end with the jewelry store. It was just the beginning of something much more meaningful, a reminder that every person has their own story, their own struggles, and their own worth. And it was a lesson that no one, no matter who they are, should ever be underestimated. As the days went by, Isabella could hardly believe the impact her story had made. What started as a simple experience at a jewelry store had turned into a catalyst for change, one that reverberated through the lives of many people who had felt invisible, overlooked, or dismissed. The post she had written had gone viral, spreading across social media and landing in the inboxes of countless people who had experienced similar situations of judgment. Isabella received messages from people around the world, stories of those who had been told they didn't belong, people who had been turned away simply because of how they looked or how they were dressed. These stories were heartbreaking, but they also filled her with a sense of purpose. It was clear that there was a much bigger issue at hand, one that needed to be addressed and understood by the world. She knew she had started something, but she also realized that the work was far from over. While the post had sparked a conversation, there was still so much more to be done. People still faced these kinds of judgments on a daily basis, and those judgments were often rooted in assumptions that had little to do with the true worth of a person. Isabella spent the next few weeks doing what she could to continue spreading the message. She reached out to organizations that supported social justice, equality, and inclusivity, offering her story as a way to open people's eyes to how damaging assumptions can be. She spoke at local events, sharing her experience, and encouraging others to stand up for themselves when they are treated unfairly. Through her newfound voice, Isabella also found a sense of community. She wasn't just one person fighting against an injustice. She was part of a larger movement of individuals who were all working to break down the barriers of prejudice and judgment. People from all walks of life began to connect, sharing their stories and offering support to one another. The solidarity was overwhelming, and it reminded Isabella that change doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when people come together and refuse to accept a world where anyone is judged based on superficial criteria. Through this process, Isabella's own sense of self grew. She had always known her worth, but standing up to those who had made assumptions about her had deepened her understanding of just how powerful it is to take control of your own narrative. She no longer felt the need to hide behind modest clothing or silence her voice in the face of judgment. She was no longer afraid to speak up for herself or anyone else who had ever been underestimated. One afternoon, as she reflected on everything that had happened, Isabella realized something important. The journey she had started at the jewelry store wasn't just about making a point to the staff or the store owner. It was about creating a ripple effect, an effect that would continue to inspire others to challenge the assumptions people make based on appearances, and to recognize the true value of every individual. She smiled to herself, knowing that the message she had shared had reached far beyond that one moment in a jewelry store. It had touched lives, sparked change, and reminded people that respect, kindness, and fairness are values that should never be compromised, no matter who you are or how you look. And for Isabella, that was a victory far greater than any piece of jewelry. Isabella's story is a powerful reminder that we should never be judged based on our appearance. No matter who you are or how you look, your worth is defined by what is inside, not by the clothes you wear or the status you hold. Have you ever been judged or dismissed because of how you look? Or perhaps you've seen someone else face the same. Share your experiences in the comments below. We would love to hear your thoughts and join the conversation. If this story inspired you, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that challenges assumptions and empowers others. Let's continue to create a world where everyone is respected for who they are. Thank you for watching, and remember, true value comes from within. Keep standing up for yourself and others, and we will see you in the next story.